Good morning, dear listener. Welcome to 88.3 FM. This is Waumini Soul Food. I'm Victor Salamba this wonderful Friday. Glad to be with you on air this wonderful day, dear listeners. We continue just trying to build our lives, build our families. At the end of the day, with the desire that we will all be able to stand. And today I'm talking about, dear listener, transitions to look out for in your marriage. Transitions to look out for in your marriage. Why am I talking about transitions, dear listener? It is because the person who mentored me was married for 42 years by the time he was coming to rest. And one of the things that he told me very early on is that you have to know how to manage transitions. And remember that the problem that kills many marriages is that transitions catch marriages off guard. Transitions catch many marriages off guard. And you find that some marriages, some of you now, listen to me and you look at your marriage and think that there's a place where it ended or something happened and you don't know what really happened. And I've seen cases where you don't really know what went wrong. But something did go wrong, dear listener. And many a times is the lack of managing of transitions. There are many things that I learned in that period of time, but I think I thought it's important because, again, I look at the experiences that I've had this week in my office, and I think that transitions need to be managed and need to be managed well. So, dear listener, the first transition that every marriage is to navigate, and I want us to be very clear here, is the transition of parenting. The transition of parenting. And I look at it from two angles. One, I'm looking at the couples that begin with a child from another relationship. That's a blended family, and those who come in and there's no child, then you get then you're blessed with a child. The funny thing is that many marriages don't know how to navigate the transition of being together as a couple. Then the child comes in. I've heard very many people saying that, I came with my child into the marriage, and my husband had enough time to know my son or to know my daughter and to connect with my daughter or whatever, and they did not. Or you hear someone saying that, this person came in with their child, and they loved their child more than they loved this marriage. Why? It's because they never understood the transition of parenting. They never talked about, okay, what happens now when we get children? How do we maintain our connection? How do we continue with our, with our romance? How do we have our date nights? How do we navigate parenting? Also, when the children grow through the stages of parenting, because parenting has good stages, how do you deal with our children as they transition? When we have teenagers, how do we sustain our marriage still when you have teenagers? How do we continue our marriage when we are grandparents? You see? So many couples get caught out. Statistically, actually, many couples end up drifting apart or affairs creep in after the second child. Statistically, 75% of marriages that have had affairs, the affairs have happened after the second child. Why? It's because the transition of parenting was never looked into. That's what happens when we move into. Last week I talked about something and someone laughed when I said that there's nothing like a family bed. But because we didn't transition in parenting, we don't understand that the children come after the marriage. Even though I came with my child or we got a child in the marriage, they came after. Number two, dear listener, transition that we never look at is the transition of growth. Transition of growth. What does Victor mean by growth? I mean that you got married with a diploma and now you're pursuing your PhD. Has the marriage have you learned how to navigate this transition? When we got married, maybe you had, maybe, and let me use the old-fashioned African setting. When you got married as a man, you are earning more than your wife. And 5-6 years later on in the marriage, your wife has been promoted and she's earning so much money that your salary looks like her tithe. Now, in this situation, it's good to understand that have you transitioned the growth that comes with career, the growth that comes with pursuing new education, the growth that comes with business? You're busy taking courses, your spouse is not. Many couples don't transition well when growth comes. In fact, many marriages have suffered at the point of growth. Muluko pamoja, you fell in love in campus when both of you are doing your first degree. Now you're in the marriage for 10 years and one of you has gone up to a doctorate, the other one is still stuck at the degree. Some of you got promoted, your spouses remained behind. You have to know how to transition growth. But when I'm growing, we have to have a conversation. How does the marriage remain stable while we grow? That's a transition that also destroys marriages. The next one, my personal favorite, is financial transitions. Financial transitions. And I want you to look at your marriage very carefully. Last week, a gentleman said that life is so difficult, and last week on one of the messages, and that life is so hard, and if they had money and all these things, and I said that's an illusion of some kind. That's why I'm asking today, have you managed financial transitions? What are they? I mean this. There are some couples who have gotten into so much trouble when money came. I know of a couple who are doing so well when both of them were struggling and they were looking for money and they were all together and every time they were together. Then when the Lord opened up their doors, things went south. I had a man in my office and this man and in my office, and we had a very long chat. That was about 3 months ago. And Victor, the point that my marriage got into trouble was the day I bought my wife a car. I gifted my wife with a car, and my wife immediately after that, we used to go home together. I used to drop her at work, and we'd spend time together. Now she has her own plans, I have my own plans, and we hardly ever meet. That's a financial transition that was not managed. Paper 2 also is, you got married, things were working, you were okay, you didn't have debt, life was okay. Then one of you lost their jobs, one of you did a bad investment, lost money, things became difficult. Many couples fail to survive financial transitions. That's why money in itself is the second reason worldwide for divorce. Second reason worldwide for divorce, because you did not manage financial transitions. One, not having money to having money. The possibilities that money brings. Some people are loyal and they are faithful because they cannot afford. And if they were able to afford, maybe they would have left you a long time ago. So we always say that to know someone, expose them to money. So have you managed financial transitions? Mumeangalia what happens. Was our life better? Was our marriage stronger when we had little? Or is our marriage worse now that we have plenty? And vice versa. When we lose, will we stand? The next one, this, dear listener, is the transition of aging parents. And I have to do a whole reflection on this one time. The transition of aging parents. Hii inakwanga blinding to many couples. Because suddenly you have sick parents who have to come and stay with you, who you have to go and see, who you have to take to hospital, have to do fundraising for, all these things. And if you don't talk about these things, and when that transition comes of your parents being in that space, you will end up fighting. Many couples don't survive the transition of aging parents, and I'll tie this to something else as well. When that happens, then when one of you loses a parent, the marriage gets destabilized. So have you looked at the transition of aging parents? Some couples began to fight and things went south when now it was time that my father is unwell and you don't care that my father is unwell. I want 100,000, you're blocking me, and my dad has gone for surgery, and people begin to fight. You have to anticipate the transition of aging parents. The next one is this, the transition of loss. Transition of loss. Here I'm talking about death. The death of parents, the death of a sibling, that's a transition. The death of your own children, that's a transition. A miscarriage, just general loss. You have to be able to have a discussion about those things. And remember that if loss happens in the marriage is unstable. Emotionally, if we don't work together, we will drift apart. I have seen couples in my office who have gone to war. I've seen marriages ending after the loss of a loved one. Why? It is because people mourn differently. And at times you find that you end up leaving someone behind. It's very important. If you look at your marriage, you might find that at the point of loss, things when maybe the loss of your mom, your dad, your sibling, whatever, loss always does a very huge withdrawal on the financial capital of a marriage. I talked about financial capital here once. And the next thing, dear listener, is this, very important as well, the transition of aging and staging. Nyinyi wawili, as a couple, you got married in your 20s and now you're in your 60s, or you got married in your 20s, now in your 30s. You have to understand the transitions of age. That is very important. I gave a reflection about this once here on air. Maybe I'll repeat it another time. But to know that now I'm in my 40s, I'm a different person. I'm in my 50s, I'm very different. There are many things that happen to us physically that we change. Our sex drive is affected. Our reasoning, many things, our fears and insecurities, many things come about when we age in life. We have to understand that transition as well. It's a very important transition, dear listener, to look at. Those are, to me, critical transitions that we need to look at. And I want to ask a simple question. Have you looked at these transitions? And are you able to navigate them? Because if you don't look at these transitions, dear listener, you'll find yourself in a place where the marriage has drifted, you have gone apart to your partner, and you don't know where the rain began to fall. Transitions are critical for growth in marriage. It helps you with the growth curve. And if I leave you behind or you leave me behind, it's difficult to come back together. So if you have moved in your career and your spouse is behind, what do you do? All matters regarding relationships, families, we are here for you, dear listener.